My dudes, football is back. Every Saturday, we will be releasing a start-sit video. Let's get to it. Falcons, and this should be quite the matchup. They have a 48.5 over-under with the Seahawks favored by 2.5 points. Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson are easy QB1s. Chris Carson and Todd Gurley should also get plenty of volume and plenty of chances to score. Chris Carson is a start every week, and Gurley, he'll most likely be a start each week, but he's not someone that we recommended that you draft. But if you did draft him, we can't imagine that you have any better options for the first few weeks of the season. At the receiver position, Lockett, Metcalf, Ridley, Julio Jones, and Hayden Hurst, start all of them. Greg Olsen probably shouldn't be started even if you're in a 14-team league. Russell Gage should only be considered in a 14-team league, and even then, he really shouldn't be started. Next matchup, we have the Jets and the Bills. Vegas makes this matchup with the Bills a 6.5-point favorite with an over-under of 39 points. This is a great matchup for Josh Allen, and the Jets' defense is not going to be great. They got rid of Jamal Adams in the offseason. On the other hand, we have Sam Darnold, and he is going to have quite the tough matchup facing the Buffalo Bills' top 5 NFL defense. In addition to the tough matchup, Darnold's also been having some poor reviews coming out of training camp. He's been struggling with his accuracy, decision-making, and he's just having a tough time making reads on the defense, so he is a definite sit this week. Le'Veon Bell is going to have a tough time against this stout defensive unit. It really sucks having to sit Le'Veon Bell week 1, but if you have better options, I'd probably do it. Alternatively, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss have a pretty solid matchup for this week, even with the Jets' defense being usually pretty good against the run. For Zach Moss, he's a low-end flex play for the week. It's probably going to be better to play the wait-and-see tactic in order to properly gauge his usage in the offense. We want to make sure that everything we've been hearing in the offseason is for real and not just coach speak. So I think Devin Singletary is going to be a solid RB for this week 1 matchup against the Jets. Receiver-wise, Diggs is a solid wide receiver 2 for this week. There won't be any Jamal Adams on the Jets secondary, and they haven't really done much to improve this offseason. So Diggs should have a pretty solid week. John Brown is probably a low-end flex play this upcoming week. We just aren't sure what his usage is going to look like with Diggs in the offense. And of course, this offense is very run-heavy, so it just makes it a bit hard to know how John Brown's going to be used and how much he'll be used in the offense. He's probably a sit for this week. Crowder won't be covered by Tre'Davious White, but he still shouldn't be anything more than a flex play in full PPR formats, and he's just not startable in half PPR and standard. Similarly, we have brighter days that lie ahead for Chris Herndon. Just look elsewhere for a starting tight end week 1. Next matchup we're covering is the Bears and the Lions. We always sit Trubisky, even though he played well against the Lions last year. Stafford is an easy play. You'll have to wait and see if he'll have Golladay for this upcoming week. Kenny Golladay is probably a low-end wide receiver 2 because of his hamstring groin injury. We're definitely starting Marvin Jones as a high-end or middling wide receiver 2 because he should see plenty of volume with Kenny injured. And additionally, TJ Hawkinson is probably a decent start, even though I'd probably prefer guys like Hayden Hurst and Noah Fant for week 1. At the running back position, we can't start Swift because we aren't even sure if he's going to be playing. And if he is, it's just going to make it a bit more difficult to know which of the running backs is a better play, even though it's probably Kerryon. Kerryon is probably a flex play for the week. He's also just barely startable. For the Bears, it would be very dumb of them to play David Montgomery, but if they do play Montgomery, it's probably nothing more than a flex play because he's still working back from his groin injury. Tariq Cohen should be a pretty solid play for the week. He'll be a high-end flex play with some major upside if Montgomery were to not play. And for the Bears receivers, Anthony Miller and Allen Robinson should play pretty well. Robinson is a low-end wide receiver 1, and Anthony Miller should be considered a wide receiver 3 with upside for week 1. I'm definitely starting both of them. Next matchup, Packers-Vikings. You probably don't want to start Cousins or Rodgers. They're both going to be QB2s for the week. Pretty easy matchup here. Start Adams, Aaron Jones, Adam Thielen, and Cook. We're going to play the wait-and-see tactic with Allen Lazard. He's probably just a flex play for the week. If you're in a 12-team league, he's probably not startable, but if you're in a 14-team league, then you can flex him. Justin Jefferson is not startable. For tight ends, the only one we really have here is Irv Smith Jr., who's just a very risky play for week 1 and should only be started in 14 teams if you have no better options, but we're labeling him as a sit. Dolphins Patriots. No more Tom Brady, so we can enter Cam Newton as a top 10 QB for the week. He should be starting in all leagues, and he should have a great week 1. As for his receivers, it will be kind of tough to know who's in the right place here. Edelman can be a high-end wide receiver 3 for the week, and N'Keal Harry probably isn't startable. For running backs, James White is a solid RB for this matchup. For the Dolphins, you shouldn't be in a position to have to start Fitzmagic. Find another QB. The Patriots lost a lot of defensive players, but I'm sure that Bill Belichick will have a pretty solid defense for 2020. Devontae Parker. He is going against Stephen Gilmore, so this will not be a pretty matchup for him. He's going to be a low-end wide receiver 2 to a high-end wide receiver 3. You probably just should try to sit Parker, because this is one of his toughest matchups on the schedule. But it might be difficult to sit him if you don't have replacements because you picked Parker in the 5th round. Gesicki, he's also a sit. There are a lot of other tight ends that are really good, so just get a better one. Both Howard and Breida are running backs at the flex and nothing more. Eagles, Washington. Start all your Eagles. Wentz, Ertz, Deshaun Jackson, Miles Sanders, start. And any other players are a bit of a reach to start. 14-team leagues, you can consider Goddard, but we're going to put him as a sit. Although I don't really recommend starting him because there are better options at the tight end position. For Washington, the Washington football team, sit Haskins. There's no reason to start him in any leagues besides some large 2 QB leagues. McLaurin and Antonio Gibson are starts, even though the Eagles have a good run defense and Scary Terry is going to be going against Darius Slay. Sims Jr. is a stretch in 14-team leagues, and he's labeled as a sit. All other Washington RBs are sits as well. Raiders Panthers. Who to start? Let's start with the obvious. CMC and Josh Jacobs. For wide receivers, DJ Moore is a start everywhere. We can sit all other options for the Panthers this week, unless Ian Thomas is your only option at tight end in the 14-team league. But there really should be some better options available. Even guys like Jack Doyle, Irv Smith Jr. are better starts for week 1. Bryan Edwards is a low-end flex play against this trash Panthers defense. Henry Ruggs, a high-end flex play, but we're going to sit Renfro. Darren Waller, we can put that dude on auto start. Probably don't have to start Carr. For Bridgewater, he's a sit for week 1. He's only playable in 14-team leagues and 2 QB formats. We're going to have to see how he does as the starter and if he's going to unleash the deep ball and use his legs. Colts Jags. Start Mack, start Taylor. Colts should run all over the Jags. It shouldn't be too close of a contest. The Jags defense is very depleted, and the Colts O-line is top 3 in the league. Their rushing O-line might be the best in football. Rivers, he's not startable. Hilton is a nice wide receiver too, but this isn't the best matchup, as the Colts shouldn't have to air it out a lot. Therefore, Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman are also sits as well. Minshew is a sit against this really good Colts defense. He should only be considered in 14-team leagues and 2 QB leagues. DJ Chark, he's going to be a wide receiver 2 for the week. He'll get his. Chark is a beast. Basically, everyone else on this offense is a sit. We have no idea how the run game's going to look, and I'm saying all Jags are sits. Thompson, low-end flex play worthy, I guess, in deeper leagues that are like PPR. Probably not. Browns Ravens. You're starting MVP Lamar. Duh. We're going to sit Baker because that guy sucks, and he's going against a good defense. It's a make-or-break year for this dude. He might not get another chance if he doesn't perform this year. Anyways, start Chubb, sit Hunt. It's a tough matchup for all of the Browns players, so everyone's getting downgrades. Chubb is still a high-end RB2 because of his volume and talent. Hunt isn't guaranteed enough volume in a tough matchup, so he's a sit this week, unless you really don't have anyone else. But there are better options, and he's a low-end flex play at best. Odell, wide receiver 2. I'm always nervous about him with Baker at the helm, but he should have a solid season and week 1 now that he's healthy from that groin injury that held him back last season. Jarvis is just a high-end flex play this week with this Ravens matchup. So we're going start-ish for Landry, and we're going to start Odell. You can start Hooper, but just don't love it. You also probably don't have many better options if you grabbed him in your draft, though. Mark Andrews, obvious start for the entire year. Hollywood, start that man. Wide receiver 2 this week, probably low-end wide receiver 2 with upside, and he always has potential for a big play. Ingram, great start this week. For those who drafted Dobbins in every single league like I did, he's a sit. It's just not a good week to start Dobbins, so we just gotta wait and see. Chargers, Bengals. Tyrod has a good matchup, and I'm gonna label him as a start, even though you should only be starting him in 14-team leagues most likely. This is one of his few favorable matchups to start the year for Tyrod. Burrows, this dude is so awesome. I'm labeling him as a start too. Yes, it's his first game against the Chargers, and they have a good defense, but he's a pretty solid option in bigger leagues. Do not start him in 12-team leagues or smaller, though. Keenan Allen, obvious start with a great matchup, especially with some injuries along the Bengals' secondary and D-line. Sit Mike Williams, even if he does play. You just don't want to mess around with that injury, and as long as Mike Williams isn't playing or isn't playing well, you can start Hunter Henry. Start Eckler, sit Joshua Kelly. Let's look at Bengals. We're going to start Mixon. At wide receiver, this is where things get interesting. If you aren't starting AJ Green week 1, then when are you going to start him? If he's healthy enough to play, then I think you should have to play him, right? I'm labeling him as a sit because the Chargers. Even without Derwin James, they have a solid secondary and overall defense. Boyd will probably get some softer coverage, but he's a flex play at best. For now, it's start Boyd, sit Green, and sit all other Bengals wide receivers and tight ends. Bucs Saints. So, is there anybody that we should sit with this matchup? This is going to be a shootout. Alright, there are a few. Sit Ronald Jones, Fournette, O.J. Howard. And I guess that's it. You want to start both Brady and Breeze. Godwin and Thomas are auto-start monsters. Mike Evans is a risky one, but if he doesn't play, Scotty Miller can see the field. Would love to see Scotty, who Brady has been raving about at camp, against some of the softer coverage. A little sleeper for the week in some deeper leagues. In this kind of a shootout, we don't really care for Gronk and Jared Cook for the duration of the season, but we gotta start him. Kamara is an obvious start. The only tough one here is Emmanuel Sanders, but you should start him. The Saints should put up some serious points this game. Both teams should through the air, as both teams have really good run defenses. I'm excited for this matchup. Cards, Niners. So this kind of sucks. If you drafted Kyler Murray in the 6th or 7th round, he has to play the Niners week 1. But he's an auto start until we see otherwise. Jimmy G, even with this great matchup, he's a sit, especially with so many of his wide receivers injured. Kittle is about to go for 20 fantasy points a game against the 2019's worst defense against the tight end. Kenyon Drake, you still gotta start him based off of draft capital, but this is a pretty tough matchup. Some obvious starts here. Hopkins, Christian Kirk, low-end flex play, so actually we're gonna call him a sit for the week. Just too tough of a matchup, and there will be better days for Christian Kirk. Sit Fitzgerald too. For the Niners, sit all of the wide receivers. There's too many injuries and just too many unknowns. I guess you can start Mostert, but just know that no one knows who's going to get the most carries in this Niners backfield in any given week. Sit all other Niners backs. Cowboys Rams. This is going to be a good one. It's a great matchup for Goff, Kupp, Woods, in what's expected to be a high-scoring game against a Cowboys' poor secondary. Start Higbee as well. Sit Akers and all Rams RBs. There's just too much uncertainty about playtime, and they're going against a pretty solid run defense. Sit Amari. Ramsey is going to cover that dude like white on rice. I'd be shocked if Amari scores more than 10 fantasy points in any scoring format. Start Gallup, start Jarwin, start Zeke, and start Dak. For 14-team leagues, you can start CeeDee Lamb. Steelers Giants. This is an away game for Big Ben, so that means sit. You can start Connor. Every game that he does play, you should be starting him. He's a top 8 back when he plays. Juju is startable, but I would probably fade Deontay Johnson for this matchup, though. We will list him as a start because the matchup isn't too tough, but if you have better options, I'd probably look elsewhere this week. You don't need to start any of the other Steelers. Sit Ebron until we know how he's used and his usage rates. For the Giants, really you should only be starting Saquon because, he's Saquon, and Evan Ingram because there's no way that you have better options. Sit everyone else. The Steelers' defense might be the best in football, so if you have the Steelers' defense, they're a must-start this week. The Giants' weapons will have better days after this early season nightmare of a starting schedule. Titans, Broncos. Gordon, because you kind of have to based off of draft. Titans, Broncos. You're starting Henry and you're starting Gordon because you kind of have to based off of draft capital, even with tough matchups. Sit Lindsey, sit Locke, sit Tannehill. Start A.J. Brown, and sit Lindsey, sit Locke, obviously, and sit Tannehill. Start A.J. Brown. I'm not sure even who's left on this Broncos defense anymore. A lot of people have left in free agency. Von Miller is out for the year, and Bradley Chubb is going to be on limited snaps. It's not going to be the usual Denver defense that we're used to seeing. I'm going to say start Jonnu Smith as well. Titans should establish the run early on, freeing up space for Jonnu on those play-action fakes. Should be a solid tight end one for the week. For the Broncos, I'm not sure if Sutton will play or how effective he will be with that AC joint sprain. Def going to start Fant though, whether Sutton plays or not. Jerry Jeudy is even startable now with Sutton's injury news. Alright, that is all of the matchups for this week. If you want more quality content to crush your league, subscribe so you don't miss anything. There will be start sits every Saturday, and we'll be doing waiver wire ads on Mondays. I'll see you guys on the next vid.